Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on accelerating automation to prepare for the future of PKI. We are going to get started in just a minute. We're just going to give folks time to join and get settled. Hello, if you're just joining us, we're going to get started in about 30 seconds. Thank you so much for joining. Alrighty, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining our webinar on accelerating automation to prepare for the future of PKI. My name is Maggie. If I have not had the chance to meet you, I lead customer marketing here at Keyfactor, and I am joined by Karthik. Karthik, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Maggie. Hi, everybody. My name is Karthik Lalitraj. I manage the solution engineering team for the Federal and the East here in Keyfactor. I've been with Keyfactor for close to 5 years now.
Wonderful. Alrighty, before we get started, just a quick note on Q&A. We love your questions. We will have plenty of time for questions at the end, but please feel free to drop in questions throughout as well. We want to make sure this is interactive. Just ask that you put your questions in the Q&A box rather than the chat. That will just help us make sure that we capture all questions. Okay, let's get into it. So here's our roadmap for this morning. So we're going to start with a quick overview of starting at that 30,000-foot view. What are we facing today in PKI? What are kind of the major disruptions that we're seeing that are shaping digital trust? And then we'll zero in on one major disruptor that is kind of opening up the need and driving an increased need for automation. So we'll get into, why is automation the future of PKI? From there, I'm going to pass it over to Karthik, and he is going to showcase Keyfactor Command, which is our certificate lifecycle management platform, and discuss how Command can help you introduce automation into your certificate management and up-level those operations to prepare for these changes coming. And then, as mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and open discussion. So as we head into 2026, we say here at Keyfactor that we're seeing a perfect storm approaching. And so this is made up by four major disruptors that are starting to converge, and they are reshaping digital trust. So each one changes how we manage identities, certificates, and cryptography. So I'm going to dive into all four of these, and then we'll zero in on one. So first and foremost is AI. It is no surprise to anybody that AI is scaling rapidly. And one way that it's impacting PKI is through the rapid increase in digital identities in the form of AI agents. So just like any other identity, these agents need to be authenticated for secure communication, which means more certificates issued more frequently in more environments than we've ever seen before. At the same time, we are seeing certificate lifespans start to shrink. So there are new mandates coming down from the CAB forum that are requiring 47-day TLS certificates by 2029, meaning that your most critical certificates are going to go from an annual renewal to a monthly renewal, which is just an increased amount of manual work. And it's also increased, potential operational strain and business risk as well that you need to face and be prepared for. We're also seeing a lot of changes in the regulatory landscape. Auditors are starting to pay more and more attention, and they're introducing new regulations and standards around PKI and cryptography. Great example of that, the CAB forum. And then last but not least, of course, is quantum. This is a big one for us. It's going to represent a major shakeup in cyber, one of the biggest shakeups that we'll see in the 21st century. And quantum computing is not a distant problem. The risk is already here. So the time to start migrating and thinking about that migration is now. It's more pressing than ever. So as we, head into 2026, it's very clear that there's a lot on PKI teams' plates. There's a lot we're facing as an industry, and we are kind of here to support you at Keyfactor. And so today we're going to zero in on one of those disruptions, and that is shorter lifespans. So with this, reduced mandate from the CAB forum, reducing TLS certificate lifespans, this is going to also have increased incremental changes over the next 2 years. So while that mandate is coming in 2029, we are seeing the need to shorten your lifespans, over the next year and 2 years. So yes, this mandate is only for those public certificates, but those certificates are often considered the crown jewels of your certs. They're some of the most critical certificates that help secure your public-facing web presence, which is often that first line of defense for many orgs. At the same time, many companies are starting to use this mandate as an opportunity to develop tighter guardrails for all certs and reduce lifespans for those private certs and improving security as a result. So altogether, whether you're focusing solely on your TLS certs that are required to reduce lifespans or, making an overhaul throughout your org, this is going to result in a lot more work. And so how much work is that exactly? We predict that certificate lifespans will increase manual workload by about 10 to 12x. So if we do some simple math on that, say you have 5,000 certs within your organization with a 398-day cycle, that means you're issuing around 12 to 15 certs per day. And when we move over to the 47 days, that is going to jump to more than 100 renewals per day. So resulting in nearly a 700% increase in workload. And PKI teams are not happy about this. So we scanned Reddit, and you can clearly see the reactions. I think that a good word to summarize it is just overwhelming. This is an overwhelming increase in workload. So even for an extremely advanced and dedicated PKI team, if you're managing certificate renewals manually, this is an impossible pace to sustain. This is not something that we can sustain manually. And it's very clear that we need automation to usher in this next era of digital trust. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Karthik, and he is going to dig in further on this.
Sure. Thanks, Maggie. So a quick point on the previous slide, right? One of the things that I'd like to say is like I have, the analogy that I use is I have two kids, right? So they always said that when you have the second kid, 1 + 1 is greater than 2. And that's so true with certificates as well, right? Like if you have to renew the certificate once a year, it's so much different than if you have to renew the certificate 10 times a year or 12 times a year. And everything gets more complex because we're going to talk about how we automate the certificate end to end. Renewing the certificate is just 20% of all the work. Right, but you still have a lot more things to do because once the certificate is renewed, you have to provision it, you have to bind it. So there's a lot more work there, right? Okay, excellent. The next slide is talking about where digital certificates are, right? So today certificates are everywhere, right? Like if you go and buy a coffee, right? You obviously let's say you scan your credit card, or if you have an app in your phone, you go and scan it, that uses a certificate. Every app has an identity. Your phone has an identity. Your devices have your identity. You yourself, if you have a corporate badge, you have an identity. Everything around that you use, you touch, including yourself, has an identity, right? Websites, applications, IoT devices, cloud apps, Wi-Fi, users, laptops, mobile phones. So everything needs an identity. And that's why you have digital certificates which are available across the globe, right? It's in hundreds and hundreds of different places, thousands, millions of places, and therein lies the need to be able to manage these, right? So we've seen explosion in digital certificates over the last few years, and we don't see a stop to this anywhere. Maggie, there are a couple of questions. Should we answer them live or should we wait till the end?
Completely up to you. We can
Okay.
go, we can do it as we go, or we can wait till the end.
Okay. So let's do it live if that's okay, because
Absolutely.
we want this to be interactive, right? So first question is I've heard that since the browser is in charge of displaying the warning, not the public certificates are affected by this change, but also internally issued web certificates, as is the case. Okay, so this is more of a comment. What's going to happen is since the time. Maggie spoke about the 47-day certificates, right? So what's going to happen is over time, folks are going to realize that when you go to any of these public CAs, you can't get a certificate more than the time frame allowed, right? So you're going to get a 47-day certificate, and that certificate will expire. And when it expires, your browser obviously, will not allow it, right? So obviously, to your point, yes, the browser is in charge of displaying the warning, but if you do have an expired certificate, that's a risk. Now, imagine this: you use certificates for your banking application. I bank online all the time, right? And if you go to a bank, your online website, and then you have a certificate which is expired, then obviously you don't have enough. You want to have trust that your money is safe, and that when you go to and do your banking online, you want to make sure that all the transactions are secure. So you're right. In some cases, it's a warning. In a lot of cases, you won't even be able to access the website. But again, at the end of the day, you want to alleviate the risk, right? And then the second question is, in order to get 100% automation, will Keyfactor Orchestrator gain the ability to restart service as part of the automated renewal and delivery process? Yes. So that's a great question. We are going to get to that because I haven't introduced the concept of an orchestrator yet. But just to quickly say, the orchestrator is a component that allows you to automate certificates, like Kelsey Smith just mentioned, and it does allow you to restart it. But it depends on the endpoint itself. So, for example, you can definitely restart for an IaaS server, right? For JKS server, excuse me, like a Tomcat or Apache, it's a little bit of a different process. So, for certain endpoints, the answer is yes. And for certain endpoints, we want the application team to be able to take care of it, because we've been in cases where like if you restart the server, then if that's a production instance, for example, right, you don't want it to affect any other systems that are there. So restart is usually done during a time frame. It's managed in terms of like a rolling restart and things like that. So we don't CLM platform, in my opinion, shouldn't be in charge of restarting applications. We do it in certain cases if the endpoint does allow it, and in certain cases, if the endpoint doesn't allow it, then we leave it to the operational teams to be able to do that. So hopefully that helps. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Next slide, please, Maggie. Okay, so one of the things that I've seen is 2029 is a few years away, and you have time, right? The big thing is when you start doing this process, you will find that there are several things that need to be addressed, right? Every single layer in your platform needs to be addressed. You need to first get all your certificates under discovery, right? You need to make sure that you don't address one portion of your organization and not the other portion, right? You have compliance needs that you need to take care of. You need to take care of operationally how these works with these various application teams. So the whole process for a mid to large organization usually takes some time to be able to put in place, right? And that's the reason why starting now is imperative. When you have an automation process in place, what works for one application team might not work for another application team. So, for example, let's say I just mentioned IaaS, right? So if you change a certificate in IaaS, you actually don't even need to restart it, right? Our software allows you to do that, but in a lot of cases, it's automatic. However, let's say if you're working with, let's say, an F5, or I'm going to do a demo with an F5, by the way, right? But let's say if you're working with Apache Store or Tomcat or Wildfly, any of the other endpoints, in some cases you might need a different operational piece. Certain complex organizations, they have a way in which they manage the private key. We're working with some banks north of the river in New York, where they have a process where the private key is stored in a HashiCorp vault, right? And every time you renew, you have to go through this process where the private key is generated within the vault, but then the automation is handled by Keyfactor Command SaaS, and then the provisioning is also provided to a different place in the vault, and then the vault will take care of the distribution into the various applications and portal servers and endpoints. So there's different components here which need to be taken place. So when we have to get all these components together working end to end, then 3 years seems actually a very short time, right? And it's already November 18th. I remember, Maggie, I remember talking about November 14th of last year when these standards were introduced, and I'm like, you blink and it's already a year past, right? So time flies, and the mandate is to be able to, level up, introduce automation, and make sure that these individual components go. And we'll talk about how you can do like a crawl, walk, run approach to be able to get to this stage. But time is ticking, right? So it's the need. Before we know it, 2029 will be here. Let's quickly go to the next, answering the next two questions, and then we'll go into what automation actually means. Is it as simple as changing the number in the orchestrator GUI from 100 days, for example, to 47, right? And the answer is no, it's not that simple, correct? Like, so at the end of the day, you're right. You want to be able to automate faster. So it's not the orchestrator GUI, but it's the I would say it's the workflow or expiration or the renewal that you need to be able to change, right? So I'll show it when I actually do the demo. But you can actually renew at a faster pace, right? But that's assuming, so that question from Jennifer is assuming you have all the different components in place. In the sense, you now have a discovery of all the certificates that you have, right? You now have the automation in place. All your endpoints are monitored. All your CAs are monitored. And you have your workflows in place, and then you have your renewals in place, and you have your binding in place. So all of this is, if it's set, then you're exactly right. If let's say you want to change from 100 days to 47, then it's a single click. So once everything is in place, the end-to-end automation is in place, then the automation piece is very, very simple. All you have to do is a script change or a UI change, and you should be good to go. But the toughest thing is to put that process in place, and it looks like you already have, which is good. Which in that case, then you can obviously get your renewal rate from 100 days to 47, right? So that's definitely something that a lot of organizations aim to do, is to able to reduce that. And tomorrow, if you want to reduce that to a lower number, then there you go, right? Once you have the automation in place, it's very, very easy to do that, right? Okay. So next question is, if an orchestrator won't start in the service, do you recommend Acme CertBot instead for automated renewal? Okay. So the way I would answer it is, if an orchestrator doesn't start, then I want to find out why it doesn't start, right? So I've been doing this for some time, and if an orchestrator doesn't start, 90% of all the problems is permissions related. So I used to joke back in the day when I was a developer, by the way, right? I was a developer and I used to work on Java. 90% of Java problems are either class cast exceptions or null pointers. And I would say from orchestrators and working with Windows, 90% of all issues are permissions related, in my opinion, right? But I don't know. I don't want to jump the gun here. So if an orchestrator won't start in services, then I would debug it. I would look at the logs, and I would make sure it starts, right? And what I would say is, please reach out to Keyfactor Command support, and then we can take care of that for you, right? Do I recommend Acme/CertBot instead for automated? That's a design question. We've had a lot of customers use Acme/CertBot. for renewals. That's typically used in containerized environments. Like command SAS obviously is containerized, and you can definitely use that as an option. Acme has a lot of benefits using certbot, but I wouldn't use that as a design to get around the fact that orchestrators won't start, right? I would use that if that works for your use case, right? So that's one thing is there. Okay, there are a couple more questions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause, and then let's go back to our slide deck, and then I'm going to handle this after a couple more slides. Okay. So automation, right? So what does automation mean? I kind of referenced this a little bit earlier, but automation means different things based off of who you speak with, right? In my opinion, when you do automation, you need to the first piece is discovery, right? You want on the left-hand side, you see all these public certificates, authorities, cloud CAs, private CAs, managed PKI. You want to be able to hook into all of those pieces which are there on the left side, right? On this diagram, right? That's the first piece. In addition to that, you want to be able to query everything which is on the furthest right. You can see F5, you can see Microsoft, Java, the servers, load balancers, portal servers, application servers, devices. All of those also need to be queried. The next piece is cloud workloads, right? HashiCorp Vault, Azure Key Vault, AWS, GCP, all of these needs to be there. Dockers, right? So that's the next piece. The last piece would be endpoints, right? IoT endpoints, OT endpoints, laptops, tablets, phones, and the like. So every one of these has certificates, and you want to be able to discover and get all of those into your inventory and into management, I would say, right? That would be the first piece, right? The second piece is to be able to talk to all of these using various protocols. The good news with Command and with EJBCA is we support all protocols from Acme, EST, CMP, SCEP, REST API, and the like, right? So depending on each of these endpoints, and I can get into each of these individual ones. So for the purposes of the demo, I'm actually going to do F5, which uses a HTTPS over REST API, right? So just so you know, that would be the end-to-end, and we'll use that for communication, right? We have a plethora of plugins. I use the term orchestrator. So an orchestrator is something that is a piece of software that we use to be able to communicate with our third-party systems, right? The orchestrator is open source. It's available in github.com/keyfactor, and a lot of what is there here in the screen in terms of integrations, the F5, the Java piece, the Microsoft piece, HashiCorp Vault, private CAs, all of these are available live for us, right? All of these are available open source, and it gives you the ability to be able to connect to these, discover them, manage them, create new servers, create new stores, add new ones, remove them, revoke them, and the whole nine. And the last case, to bind them as well, right? The whole 9 years. Okay. So automation, end-to-end automation is where we thrive in. Okay. Maggie, next slide, please. Okay. The key ingredients to getting this automation right is the various steps that we just spoke about, right? Visibility is to be able to go into all your public CAs, private CAs, cloud stores, and to be able to get an idea of what you have today. Accountability is using the first, after visibility, you want to identify risk, and that is what is accountability, right? Identifying the risk and to be able to categorize the risk, right? So what does risk mean, right? Risk means let's say certificates which have a weaker hash, that could be a risk. Certificates which are expiring in a month, that could be a risk. Certificates which are self-signed, for example, that could be a risk. So you can identify and create your risk profile, and then have an accountability to it. So you can actually say, I want to assign this certificate to a specific owner, to a specific business unit, to a team, to an individual. And you want that individual to be able to take care of the certificate, right? So you want to identify risk and then set an accountable person. You don't have to set an accountable person when you get the risk. You want to set the accountability as and when you create the certificate as part of the process. The governance piece is to be able to continuously monitor inventory, set alerts, renewals, so that you will be able to have that end-to-end. Same thing with workflows, right? Simplify request and approval workflows so that whenever you have a certificate that's expiring, you want to be able to set up a workflow to have that in peace. Before I go to the deployment, I did see a question along the lines of workflows, which is the ServiceNow. So Nitesh asks, considering audit, we carry along ServiceNow in everything we do, which does sound like a hindrance in this automation, considering the frequent updates. How does Keyfactor plan to tackle that? So the answer would probably be another webinar. So Maggie, I think we're going to be doing a webinar with ServiceNow, correct? Please correct me if I'm wrong. We actually have a ServiceNow plugin, which is live today. And I don't remember the exact date, but there's one webinar, I think next week, and one in December. Please keep me honest here. But we can give you the details, Nitish.
Yes, we can follow up with the details. Karthik is actually going to be leading a webinar in December on this, specifically around Command and our integrations with ServiceNow. And then we also have an overview webinar that's happening this week, I believe. So we can absolutely follow up with you on those webinars.
Thank you, Maggie. And the only thing that I would add is this is not a hindrance at all. In fact, it's the way SaaS Command likes to work is we want to work the way you work. If you're using ServiceNow as a first-class citizen, then we would love to hook on to that process and we would love to hook on to that process and use ServiceNow for all the automations, right? You can use ServiceNow as the system of truth and use Keyfactor to be able to have that end-to-end automation, right? So we actually have extensive webinar. That's another topic for probably an hour, right? Okay. Will there be any automation considerations for client certs or MTLS where the client needs to have a copy of the certificate to connect or authenticate? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we support MTLS there as well. So we can give you more information on that. But yes, we support client certs or MTLS where the client also needs a copy of the certificate. Yes, for sure. Is there a Windows Acme client that you recommend? We just use Cert Manager as an Acme client, right? Cert Bot, right? I think one of the other gentlemen mentioned that. So that's typically something that we would recommend. Keyfactor has a Acme server that you can connect to, but typically Cert Manager, Cert Bot, right? So that's something that we usually use, right? Okay, let's move on to there's a few more questions, but I'm going to mix up questions with the demo itself. Okay, all right. So the last slide before I get into the demo. So usually, as part of your lifecycle automation, you want to crawl, walk, run, right? So I spoke extensively about Discover, right? How you can discover certificates, CA integration, SSL discovery, certificate stores. You want to be able to control your risk, and that's using metadata. We have a concept of collections where you can group certificates a certain way so that you can report on it, so that you can alert on it, so that you can have workflows on it. The third piece is the automation piece, which would be something extremely helpful from an end-to-end perspective. And then we have extensive integrations with the orchestration community. I'll show you that. We have obviously REST integration. In some cases, we use various protocols. No integration is complete without Acme REST and Acme EST and SCEP. We have that as part of our EJBCA offering as well. And obviously, you have it with Command PKI as a service. So there are various options there. but we provide the end-to-end lifecycle automation. The final piece, which is not here, which is the binding piece. So essentially, when you deploy a certificate, depending on what platform it is, what the endpoint is, we also bind the certificate to, let's say, a virtual IP, for example, for F5. Let's say we bind it to a server. In some cases, like for example, Amazon uses what is called as ARN, which is the Amazon resource number. And we use the same resource number in case you're renewing a certificate, so you don't have to change things, right? So we take care of the final stage as well, which is the binding piece, depending on how you do the automation, right? Okay, so Maggie, I believe that's the last slide before we get into the demo, correct? So at this point, I think Maggie stopped sharing, and then I start my sharing. So give me 1 second. Okay, can you see my screen, Maggie?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. Okay. So here's what we're going to do, right? So I'm going to quickly show you the command SAS dashboard, right? So the command SAS is where we've now built a platform which allows you to be able to not only look at Keyfactor Command and everything that we've spoken about, but it also gives you operational capabilities into the product itself, right? Command SAS runs on Kubernetes. And when you log into that environment, you now have a dashboard which tells you the system health. It gives you an overall view of what you've done, right? What this allows you to do is configure things out of the box, right? For example, let's say you wanted to configure a public gateway, right? So in this example, I've configured DigiCert, right? But you could do this with any gateway, right? All you have to do is go to the UI and then follow the prompts and be able to configure the gateway. Same thing with orchestrators, right? You can use the command SAS platform to be able to configure orchestrators. You can restrict IPs, right? You can restrict source IPs. You can look at the logs, right? And then if you wanted to configure what is called as CA connectors for on-prem Microsoft CAs or on-prem EJB CAs, then you could do things like that as well. So essentially what we've done is we've moved everything to a containerized model, and we've given you an easy and flexible way to be able to manage these as part of your command SAS portal, right? So this is something that we're moving towards, where everything will be containerized, and the command SAS portal will give you additional leverage in terms of what we're in terms of the operational features, right? The command piece itself will remain the same. With the 25.4 version, we are actually going to have a much more richer UI where we have a few updates. This is the command 25.2 version of the software, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about how you enroll for a certificate, right? So that's the first piece in automation, right? So it's the second piece first. First piece is discovery. Discovery is when you configure various certificate authorities, right? Like now I have several of these certificate authorities that I've configured. I have several certificate stores that I've configured, where you can go in and you can look at them. I'm going to be focusing on this F5 store here, right? So if I look at this store, I can see a bunch of different certificates. We're going to see if we can provision a certificate into this F5 store and see if we can showcase that, right? So what I'm going to do in this demo is I'm going to go in and I'm going to use I have an EJBCA. I have 4 EJBCA CAs here. So you can see that this one is, let's see if I can highlight this guy. Okay. Okay. So this one is an RSA. Okay. This one does RSA certificates. This one does ECC certificates. This generates hybrid certificates, and this generates PQC certificates, which is MLDSA. Okay, so this one, so we have 4 different certificate authorities, and each one does its thing. For the purposes of the demo, I'm going to generate a hybrid certificate, right? So the hybrid certificate will have an RSA as its primary algorithm, and then the alternate algorithm will be MLDSA. Okay, so I'm going to be doing this because obviously PQC is everybody wants to mint PQC certificates. So if you are looking to mint this, we have a PQC lab ready today. That you can go and you can mint PQC certificates today, right? So that's possible today. But then if you wanted anything else as well, you can like an on-prem version or a SaaS version that mints PQC certificates. Just let us know, right? And we can get that for you as well. For the purposes of the demo, I'm going to be using the hybrid CA. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enroll for a certificate, right? So this is the part of the automation piece, right? Is enrolling for a certificate. I'm going to enroll for the hybrid certificate right there, right? So that's the hybrid certificate that I'm going to be looking at. Let's do it for F5 virtual IP 1. Oops. Virtual IP 1. November 18th. The demo right up. Oops. Okay. I'm going to be enrolling for the certificate. Okay. I'm not going to give any metadata or any owner, or maybe, you know what? I'm going to give an owner, right? So I'm going to say this is for let's say an admin user, right? So a customer. Let's say I'm going to do it for a customer. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to complicate the enrollment process. If I hit the enroll button, it's going to enroll for a certificate. I'm going to go and say install into stores, right? I'm going to say install into stores. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this F5 store here, right? The store here, so that it allows you to now deploy into this store, right? So I'll choose the store and I'll include it. So what this would do is it's going to enroll for the certificate against an EJBCA. It's going to enroll for a hybrid certificate against EJBCA. And then it's also going to deploy this into the store. Now, here's the key piece here. You see this alias? Let's see if I can highlight this guy. Okay, so this alias is the final mile. Okay, so when I say the final mile, that means this is what is used to bind this certificate to your virtual IP for an F5, right? Now, bear in mind, every endpoint is different. The automation for every endpoint depends on how the vendor has coded for this. But the automation for an F5 is where you use the alias to be able to bind the endpoint into the virtual IP, right? So when I hit enroll, what this does is it would enroll for a certificate, right? So you will have the certificate immediately, which is great, right? So the certificate comes in town, right? But you will see here that, let's see. Okay, so you will see the locations here. You see that it's not there. So I got my certificate, right? But the location is now empty, right? But if you look at something I did earlier today prior to this demo, you will see that the certificate was deployed onto F5, right? So what I've done is I've scheduled a job which would now run, and it would put that certificate in there, right? So that job, I think, is complete. So you will, yeah, there you go. That job is complete. And you will now see, if I go back in here, you will see this, that the location, you have the certificate, right? So let's see here if I can show you this. Okay, the location has the certificate. Okay, so you will see the certificate. The first piece is you will see the certificate in there. Okay, so that's there, right? So if I go to locations, okay, so you see that I put in the certificate onto the F5, and I'll actually show it to you in the F5 as well. So I have F5 here. It's logged out for me because it looks like I spoke a lot, but I put the F5 under store path common. I put it with this corresponding alias, right? So so the good news is the certificate is in there, right? The other piece is this one is a hybrid certificate, but it's coded with SHA. The primary algorithm is RSA with SHA-256, but then the alternate signing algorithm is a hybrid algorithm, right? So we have a hybrid certificate that's been deployed on the F5. If I'm not mistaken, certain F5 servers honor hybrid certificates today. So certain endpoints do hybrid certificates. I don't know if F5 honors quantum certificates yet, but certain F5 servers, I think the certain models that F5 Next, I think they honor hybrid certificates. So we found that the certificate was deployed. Let's log into F5 and then let's look at the certificate in there, right? Hold on. And I'm conscious of time. I know we have just 5 minutes left, Maggie. So, okay, I go in here, I go to certificate management, and you will now see, oops, reset. Let's see if my certificate was in here, right? So let's say, what was my certificate again? It was the F5 VIP one, right? So I'll go here, F5, oops, F5 VIP one. There we go. And now I have my certificate, right? Now you can see that it's the RSA algorithm, but then you have your hybrid certificate, and you have your sub-CA, which is a hybrid certificate, as well, right? So you have the certificate in here, and you can see that the alias of the certificate is right there, which would be the name that the F5 uses to be associated with your VIP, right? So you would be able to do that. I want to quickly showcase one more thing and answer a couple of questions. And then I'll hand it back to you, Maggie. So the one thing that I would quickly want to share is somebody asked about how you can change the automation from 100 days to 70 days, right? So you can quickly see that when you set up an expiration, I'm going to just open up one of these. You see this piece here. You see this piece where you say time frame. So you can actually set that time frame accordingly. So if your time frame were 100 days, then you can set this to 10 days or 20 days or 47 days or a month, like Maggie said. So all of this is possible, and it's part of the process. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing, and then what I'm going to do is answer a few questions, and then hand it to you. Okay. Okay. The first question is, after the orchestrator delivers a cert, how do you get the remote application to recognize and use the cert? Would it be simply to have the remote application use certbot to pull the Acme cert, and then it would schedule the application restart? Yes, that's one way to do it, Wilson. The other way to do it would be using what the Acme server or the endpoint recognizes. So in some cases, it's just specifying the alias should be sufficient. And then if you have I don't know if I showed you this, but you can actually override the alias in case the alias is already there, right? So again, it depends on the endpoint, but what you mentioned is probably the best way with certbot itself. The next question was, I think there was a question on whether this recording would be shared, Maggie, because they had to drop, and I believe it would be, correct? The
Yes,
recording, in fact, will be shared. Okay. Okay.
absolutely.
I want to give you a couple of minutes. Can you take the screen sharing from me?
Absolutely. If you stop share, I will.
Hold on. I'm trying to see where's my screen here. I apologize.
No problem. I have reclaimed. Okay.
There we go. Thank you. I appreciate it.
So we have several more questions. We do have time to answer them. Before we jump into the remainder of these questions, we are going to just toss up a poll here. So a lot of information shared here today, whether you're a command user or not. We'd love to know if you would like to schedule a follow-up session with your team. If you don't use command and want to dig in further, please let us know. If you're new to Command SaaS and want to learn more about that, we would love to hear from you. So please go ahead and just fill out what works best for you in the chat. Sorry, in the poll. So, Karthik, we will now address the rest of our questions. I think we have about 8 more.
Okay, we have 1 more minute, so maybe how many questions can we tackle?
Let's take 2 to 3 more, and then we can answer the rest offline.
Okay, excellent, excellent, awesome. Okay, the next question is, in the context of certificate discovery, my understanding is that Keyfactor Command scans an IP range or CID or block for specific posts. How does Keyfactor Command map the discovered IP addresses to the appropriate certificate common names, given that a single IP address, such as the one hosting Apache virtual host, can serve multiple distinct certificates? No, that's a great point, right? You are right. You are exactly right, Khaled, that as part of the discovery, Keyfactor will be able to scan everything for you, right? Essentially, if a single IP address hosts multiple virtual hosts or serve multiple certificates, then we will be able to discover everything. However, your application logic as to which CN hosts what will be something that the application team owners, somebody from either yourself or somebody from your team, would be know it. So we will work with you to be able to map that accordingly. What Keyfactor Command SAS allows you to is several ways to be able to do this. Maggie spoke about application ownership a little while back, right? Where you can associate an application owner to some of these certificates. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is like using a metadata tag to be able to tag that with a department or with someone outside of the application owner, like an application owner's manager and the like. So there's multiple ways to be able to do this. Once you discover, you're right, you need to go through a step to be able to manage these CNs to be able to do this, and using the Keyfactor application owner tags, the metadata tags. We should be able to do this. Maggie, I think we are a minute late. Is there time for one more, or are we good?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this is a 45-minute webinar, so if you need to drop, no problem. We will be sharing the
Okay, we'll
recording,
do one more.
but we can absolutely address a few more questions if some folks want to stay.
Okay, we'll address one more. How efficiently do you recommend to manage the certificates via Orchestrator? Example, single application has 2, 3 servers, and whether we need to add all servers, certificate stores, /JK stores. The way I would do that, Ramesh, is I would do everything, right? I would manage everything with Keyfactor Command because you need. See, I as a person want visibility into everything, right? Sometimes you have 2, 3 servers, and each server has multiple stores or multiple endpoints. And each endpoint, even though you use one certificate, there might be 5 or 6 certificates in there which are there but are not used, right? So I want to be able to look at everything in those stores as well, right? So essentially what I would love to do is to add all the servers /stores /JK stores, irrespective of whether they're associated with the endpoint or not. And oftentimes you'll be surprised what you find there, right? You might have self-signed certificates in there. You might have certificates which are incorrect, which have a typo, and you might want to be able to like certificates which are not from a CA that's authorized for your company. So you want full-fledged view of not only what's on that endpoint, but also what's not there and what's in those stores, what's in those servers, so that you'll be able to manage these accordingly. Right? This makes sense, right? Okay, awesome. So thank you everyone for your time. I think there are a few questions are still coming, Maggie, but we'll probably have to take that offline and then we'll be able to answer them.
Yes,
It was great.
absolutely. We will document all questions. We will follow up. There are a few requests to cover some other product areas, so I've noted those and we'll make sure to follow up with you directly. But yes, thank you all so much for the active participation, for all of the questions, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.